All right, Quentin, it's you. What do you got?
Let's see. Not much. Just did some triage of the assembly line issues this week. Try to clean up the issue list to make it just have things that we're planning to do or that still have relevance. So they didn't end up deleting very many things, but at least I was able to look them all over. And that's pretty much it since classes start next week.
I've got questions for what you have, for what you were seeming to prioritize and talk about what should be there. Specifically, the one that's on the top of my head is like the things for like all repos, as in like things for all of our Massachusetts repos and stuff, because there are quite a few that are like end up being, oh, well, we need to check to make sure that we don't have like header accessibility issues in all of our things, which I think you had a question that I meant to respond to and I didn't yet. I'll do that after this. But essentially, like, yes, that's like a really easy accessibility fix. It's just very prevalent in all of our things because DocAssembly chose weird defaults, but like we should fix it for all of our stuff. And where we want to track that. And I also do think that we should track these things. When it comes to some of the stuff that we do, I don't think which I think I've talked about this sometimes, of like I don't think we quite prioritize like maintaining our existing forms as much, which is fine, but like knowing that we should leave all of that open much longer than like we normally would, and we shouldn't consider like, oh, like trying to go through and sweep out, like we should, if we do that, we should just do them, and like figure out ways like that we want to make updates to a lot of our forms, and if there's something that's stopping us, like figuring out what's stopping us and making that better, because I think we're the only org at this point, maybe Matt a little bit, but we're the only org at this point that has like all of these existing interviews, and so I feel like we're prioritizing a lot of other things for grant partners, but at some point in the next 3 years, hopefully everyone else gets to this point where they have lots of other interviews that they need to be updating and keeping track of. And if it's hard for us, it will be hard for them. So like we should figure out ways that to do those things before it starts coming up with everyone else.
Yeah.
I think we've talked a bit different times about like where to track those. I think the challenge is if we see an issue on our repo, on the assembly line repo, and it didn't describe, we have to check this in every interview. I think it needs a different issue to say track this instead of just a comment in the thread. So that's one thing. I didn't close ones that were opened as track this on every issue and resolve it on every repo and resolve it.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that because I think I just have a problem with that process of, doesn't mean that we can't track it here at all. I have been meaning
to play around with the GitHub. GitHub has like essentially the command board stuff, like all the Trello stuff that we have, but it's just on GitHub, which I think we've talked about this.
Projects they're called, yeah.
Yeah,
projects would be a very good way to do this.
Yeah. To
make a project when we have something like that. But even then, we might still want an issue to remind us because we're better at looking at our issue boards. You can have projects. Let me see. Can projects involve multiple repos?
Yeah, you can have org-wide projects.
You could have org-wide projects. Okay.
Yeah, there's not like org-wide issues, but there are org-wide projects.
That might be the best way to do it, because then there's like discrete cards for each. So the thing is, figuring out how we can automate that a bit, probably, right? Like, can we make, when we say this applies to every repo, can we somehow automate making a card for every repo? That would be really nice. The other, but that particular issue is a bit funny because it's very ad hoc, right? Like it was actionable on the assembly line repo to say, let's make sure all of our headers are the right level. But once you expand that to, because we've done a lot of other accessibility work on that repo.
Yeah.
But once we expand it to every repo, it's like kind of a random thing to say, we're going to look at this one accessibility issue on every repo. But I think having an audit for accessibility of all of our repos is a great idea. But to say we're going to just choose this one item, which will be flagged by our automatic checks,
Yeah.
it's probably not the right scope for the issue either.
What do you?
My thoughts.
I'm trying to figure. Yeah, I'm trying to. What do you mean? I'm not sure I understand what you mean by the fact you'd prefer like a accessibility out of all repos, because to me that feels much more not actionable than accessibility out of this one thing for all repos. Like at least one of them is like you could take a little. It is still like a big audit, but you can take a little bit of time and like with 5 minutes you could check off one repo, whereas accessibility out of all repos is a magnitude larger, and would be like an hour to check off one repo. And so it still feels like
Right.
smaller is good. Is it the fact that it would be like just a 5-minute issue, and making the issue would take half as long or take almost as long, essentially big O time, as like checking that one repo for accessibility? Is that what you're thinking of? Or
I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with process taking time, because when we're
Yeah.
trying to manage a lot of repos, there needs to be process. And even a team of 3 people, even for one repo, you need process, right? Like, so I'm okay with process. It's more just when we say this is the thing we're going to work on, well, why haven't we listed other accessibility tasks? So, I mean, we could turn it into like a checklist per repo that says check for accessibility. You can check off this one item when that one item is done. That makes sense to me. I don't know, maybe when we come up with the idea and that's the scope of the idea we had, we just make it across all of our projects. That might be fine, but that's my concern, is like,
Okay.
it didn't feel targeted or comprehensive. It felt a little random. And then the location of it felt a little random. And then it being in the thread rather than as its own issue, because the original open issue was described differently. So I'm
Okay.
open to ideas. I mean, the other thing that I keep thinking about when we think of these old issues that we don't act on is some of them could be closed really easily, and maybe we should just have, that's what I was saying, like we might need to come up with a balance and have a scheduled plan for balancing the different kinds of things. There's things that kind of can lead to code rot or just bad user experience over time. There's things that are user visible features. There's things that are just like, I call the other category like developer experience things.
Yeah.
We should be like spending some time on all of those. But if all of our issues, we don't have a strategy for dealing with those, even if I can spend an hour on doing something, is it the right balance of work to be working on a lot of small issues that don't have any user visible effect? Probably not if that's what I spend all my time doing. I don't think we do that, but feels like it would be good to have some strategy there too. Sorry, that's a totally different topic from like where to put
That's a valid
repository
topic, though.
things. Yeah. I guess we didn't quite close the first one though. I mean, I really like the idea of a project, and but I feel like it needs to be tied to some way to generate the list from the list of repos automatically somehow. I'm not sure how easy that is. Like, I don't know if you can sort, like if we can tag the repositories and have a tag be associated with the repo so that we know which ones we want, because there are a lot of repos that wouldn't relate to actual interviews.
Yes, yeah.
And
Yeah,
some that are interviews that were just in a draft stage that sure someone could do it for, but maybe it shouldn't be opened as a active chore for somebody. You can put tags on repos. So maybe that's the answer, at least topics. I'm not sure we can sort by topics.
So yeah, I'm looking at some of the stuff, and I'm trying to just play around. Like I think the thing would be to play around with projects a bit, which I will likely do. Like I was planning on having, I have been kind of bad at the organization of the e-filing stuff, and I have it in multiple places. Some of it's just only visible to me in like my personal notes, and so I'm trying to make sure it's all in GitHub. Like, I don't think it makes sense to have it in. I like went through and found an old Trello board that I had from like the first summer of trying to do this push. It's not relevant anymore, and so I made like the two things that were still doable into issues. But all that said, I was going to try and make a project for this specific thing, and it will be just like this on a smaller scale of the EFSP integration package for DocAssembly, and then the actual e-file proxy package, and then maybe like the two e-filing enabled interviews. It'll be just be those four, and so it'll be at that smaller scale. And I can play around with GitHub projects, see what it has, and see if what it has would be good enough for just all DocAssembly interviews.
Yeah, if it was just all DocAssembly interviews, that's not the end of the world. We could just start with that as being our default every time.
Yeah,
because it probably adds like 20 extra interviews, maybe at most. It's not the end of the world.
But it's one of those, if we could get it with all DocAssembly interviews, it wouldn't be too hard to just get like visible interviews or production, something like that. Like, you're right, it's probably going to be like the topics or something like that that we might be able to filter on. And I'll see what is usable or is doable. We could probably do a lot of stuff, but I'll try and keep it fairly low, like specialty or whatever. If it's like built into the tool, then that would be good. But if it's like, oh, we would need to use the API in some special script, then I'll just not do that.
Yeah, that's fair. Although I think like anytime we open an issue like this, which is check all of our repos for X, we at least need a way to do that. So if it's not part of projects and it needs an API, maybe that's worth it. Like, we could use the AL actions repo to do it, maybe to store it.
Maybe I guess I was going through some of those, and I don't really know what else. You mentioned one other thing that could like go in that repo, and I'm like, I don't really like, how do you run that essentially? Yeah.
What was the other thing? Do you remember?
It was like making an empty GitHub with DocAssembly stuff, so you could just start with a repo instead of having to start with the playground.
Oh, okay.
Which is like a good point if we're encouraging people to like, oh, try it out in VS Code, and we eventually get enough stuff out there so people don't have to go straight to the playground. That's not a bad idea, but it's one of those, like, the actions it's just actions. You run an action. Like, I can't imagine that being an action, or at least I can't imagine the action being the best way to do that. Like, something that someone manually triggers. But all that said, I get what you're saying, and if a tool like that is what we need, we can figure out where it should go. And maybe AL actions just becomes AL actions and some other stuff. So
in my head I was thinking this is a place for like miscellaneous scripts, but maybe it should be a DocAssembly CLI thing, which is what I said here.
Yes.
I opened this just as like a random thought. It's not too important.
Sure,
I think, that's exactly right. Like, if you want to start a GitHub repo from the command line, because that's what you're using, you can't really do that now. You have to start it in the playground and then download it, and then you can start.
Which is easy. Yeah, this is a bit side topic-y, but I think the main thing is, I at least think there are things we can do.
Okay.
I'll look into projects and then make sure that the one thing that we could do would be make an issue for this in all repos, and like put it in the project or whatever, so we can easily track them. Because that's the other part, is just tracking all of them is what projects would be great for. So.
Right. Yeah. Okay. If we can do a project across repos, that's the solution, I think, which makes me think more about, I use Trello for a lot of things. And maybe we should be just using, it's very easy for people who don't know anything technical to interact with Trello. That's one of the reasons why it's worth it. I don't know if it makes as much sense for our project anymore for most of the things we're doing.
Yeah.
But,
and they still have the command board sort of style, which maybe I'm just too used to GitHub, but it seems the same. Like, if we just tell people, make a GitHub account and then go to this link, it looks like a command board. It would be the exact same as us trying to teach someone how to use Trello.
Yeah.
But maybe not.
There's some UX differences. It's definitely the same concept. It's a Kanban board, but it's not. I would not say that the UX is as polished. To make a GitHub account, for example, you have to like play a 1980s style adventure game. That throws people off from right at the beginning.
Really? I haven't made a GitHub.
You haven't done it in a while, I guess.
So I guess
I haven't done it. What are
I
they?
walk my students through it. It's every
Really?
year, so yeah.
They must have just added this since last year.
No, It's been
No.
for a while.
I don't remember that, but I
I'll
guess
show
I had a GitHub account for a few years.
Oh God, this is horrible.
Yeah, like it takes you to this blinking cursor, and like, this is shouldn't be like lingering here this long. This isn't normally what
Yeah,
I
I
see. It
can't see
normally
your-
jumps right to the thing.
That's okay. We weren't seeing your screen share. Now we're
Okay,
sort of seeing
now
it.
it's going. See,
Oh,
this is not a good UX for people compared to Trello. So, but anyway, that doesn't really matter because I think we could still say we're going to use GitHub anyway for our projects. I'm just saying like why I still use Trello and other outside work.
That's fine, yeah. And it still makes, Trello still makes most sense, but it's just when it comes to actually working with the code, like I don't think you can beat the GitHub built-in tools. So
Yeah, I mean, there is an integration for GitHub with Trello, but it's not as good as just having a GitHub project.
I mean, there's an audience question too as to who will be using these tools. So it's really,
yeah, and these things I do think will be mostly us. Like we've talked about this, and I think we've landed on like it's not the students. It doesn't make sense to have like the students do a ton of this sort of stuff. Like maybe every now and then they can do a little bit, but like if the majority is on like the lab, then I feel like that's not too bad.
But there's some, I mean, what I think is you're really right. We need some kind of maintenance schedule, rotating somehow, some way to do it. We might want to trigger off like some automated chores that come up like once a year, check to see if the form has changed that you're automating, right? Like, so we're going to want things, those are going to be appropriate for students to do. So we should consider that a little bit. But I think teaching students how to use GitHub is not a problem. They're going to use GitHub in many ways if they do any work like this. But we should expand our thoughts beyond just saying the lab will do all this, because I think that's probably not true. I think there should be some tasks that are appropriate.
Yeah, we should be able to
maintaining maintenance wise.
Yeah.
That's kind of what our philosophy has been. It's like we can keep growing because we're going to have students every year. So we have this, we just have to make sure that the maintenance tasks are doable with less training. But that should be our goal rather than saying like throwing up our hands and saying, well, students can do new stuff and then we'll spend like 3 times as long to actually make it work and then to maintain it.
I agree.
Okay.
The nice part though about the students is they would be coming in and using it pre-set up. So, I mean, you have to get a GitHub account and stuff, but I mean, like,
they don't have to learn how to create an automation in GitHub, for example. Yeah,
to the extent that we can queue things up for them.
And it's perfect to say, hey, we'll train you to do this once. Now go ahead and do it for 50 repos. That's like,
that's perfect.
That's what you want with a job for someone who's just starting out, something they can be trained on the simple thing, repeat it. Maybe they don't want to do it for 50 repos, but if they get 10 done, still like we're advancing things. Okay, so I think we have an idea for that, which is to make a project. For that one particular issue, Bryce, what I would say is let's just make the scope of the issue the way that it was originally described. We can open a new issue for now, or maybe we can just open an issue that says here, which is fine. It can be a meta issue. That's the tag. I don't know we probably have too many tags now, but it's okay.
Are you using tags and labels interchangeably, or is a tag something different from a label?
I said the wrong word. I should have said label.
Okay.
All right. Anything else?
The only other thing to think about is like, I guess we might do internal discussion on our coding group, but what is the right balance? Because what happens is like when we're working on a big project like this, we get lots of ideas for things to improve it. And what is a good balance among those different audiences of the things we can do to improve it? Like, should we have a conscious method for deciding how much to spend on refactoring or developer experience stuff, how much to spend on new features, how much to spend on usability related issues?
So part of my intuition there is that some of that might be driven by what we think is, I guess it means by who you mean by we. I do think it would be nice if we could slow down, and we had talked about this before, and I think this is the direction we're going. Slow down and try to get the students involved in doing more stuff that's going to bear fruit, even if that isn't the flashy, everyone builds a full DocAssembly interview. And so if we think there's places where the students can add value, then I think we can focus some time there. And that helps, take some stuff off our plate. But I get a little frustrated. We had a wonderful bit of time, 2 years ago when everyone came in, they did a bunch of stuff and we got a lot of things out the door. But I feel like this last year and some change, the students' work has the students' contribution to production stuff has been less. And I think the students benefit from doing stuff that goes out into production, because then they're help, especially now with the clinic, because that's the idea, is they want to help real people.
Mm.
And so the reality is helping real people sometimes isn't always doing the glamorous, I built an entire thing. It's, and that's an important lesson.
No, that's very much true. I think one of the challenges is that it's never been the case that those interviews went live without really like myself or Bryce making them actually work
a lot of
most of the way. And a big issue is been like knowing when we have the go ahead to make it live.
Yeah.
Even though we built that maturity model, like I don't know if we've really adhered to it in every instance. And it's very hard for the things that were built for clinics, especially.
Yeah.
We never really had a chance to tell the clinical professor running the clinic to say like, hey, this is going to go live when it has this level of features. You might keep fine tuning it all you want. That's fine. We'll make a backlog for the next person to do it, but it's not going to block it from going live.
One of the nice things is when we have our students building our stuff for us without that second boss involved, we'll be able to make those calls more clearly.
We still might have a second boss for most of them, right? It depends, I guess, on which.
It depends. Yeah. But the second boss might not be another clinic. It might be someone with whom it's easier to have a conversation about. I'm just, attorneys are often very adverse to the idea of minimum viable product.
Yes. It's very hard. I mean, it's anytime you have like a creative work, it's hard for people to know when to say it's done. Yeah. Especially when you're doing the work for free for somebody, and even more so if you reached out to them and said, hey, do you want to do this, rather than them coming to you with a timeline and a budget.
Yeah. All right. Well, those feel like larger continuing conversations.
Yep, definitely.
But to the thing that sort of came up naturally out of that, it sounds like maybe, Bryce, there's things to look at for, automating what you can. And yeah. All right. Anything else, Quentin?
No, not I can think of. I mean, I think I might take in my head. I think I'm going to probably try to clean up some of those, especially the smaller issues, just to get them off of our list. And I think there's some worth there, but we should just keep in mind that broader thought about knowing how to prioritize those things. And then documenting them is the other thing. We're really good at documenting stuff. And then anyway.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
All.
All right, Bryce.
My major update is that I finally got ECF5 to work. I won't say it's 100% done, but finally I can make a filing with it. wasted a
But-
week. Wasted a week turning off one specific thing this week, which was like it's in their documentation. It's like, oh, turn this off if you're not charging people, and I had it off, and they're out there. Their side just says unknown error, and then I turn it on and say we're charging people $0. They're like, okay, you're good. So I don't know.
They hadn't ever conceived anyone would actually turn off charging people money.
Honestly, yeah, that's definitely what it was. But yeah, so I did that. I like it's kind of in. I took a quick break to try and wrap up some of the payment stuff with Matt, which I think is going well. I think he was asking Sarah one more question about sort of filing codes and what we should use where, but I think that's like the last thing. And then I was sort of just this morning going through and making lots of little tiny commits that I make tons of small changes and then never actually make branches for them or commit them. And so I'm finally doing that for a bit, trying to wrap things up as best as I can. Yes, for a little bit.
Okay.
Oh, and I was going to say also when I was looking around for the GitHub stuff, apparently there is a more normal more normal way to make GitHub accounts. You have to go through the pricing page though. So if you go to the pricing page and you make a free account, it gives you a normal looking screen and not whatever that space adventure
The game thing.
So wait, how do because I haven't
Wait, is
been
this for an organization that, oh no, create
I'm
an
gonna have to have my
organization.
students do this. So now I'm very hyper aware. What was so where do you go? I'm bringing it up.
Something
The
like, it
price,
looks like,
this says for an organization, create a free
is that for
organization.
organization?
That's what it looks like to me.
All right, we'll have to play around.
Maybe
Well,
maybe that still takes you to the place where you don't have to actually create an organization.
Oh, well, yeah, the second page is just my person. It gives you says this organization belongs to, oh, that's because I'm logged in. I'll have to figure this out. Okay, whatever.
All right, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Anything else? ECF 5, that's great.
Yeah.
Oh, first create your
those
user
really
account.
nice.
Okay.
Yeah,
And-
it does, you don't have to have an it says individuals or organizations. Free, the basics for individuals and organizations, join for free.
But the action button is where I'm seeing create an organization as the only action to choose from.
Wait, so
Join.
Maybe it's because I'm already
You
logged in.
click
Hold on.
join
Let
for
me go.
free, username, email address, there's no it's not
I do
asking.
think it's because you're logged in.
It might
It
be
just
because I'm
says
logged
join
in.
for-
Let me
it
try
just
that.
says
Yeah,
join
I
for
think
free.
it, yeah,
Oh, I see join for free now. Okay.
yeah.
I just didn't see
Wait,
that option.
where
before.
is the join for free?
You have to be logged out.
Okay, and then
Or
where?
or incognito, you can go in.
Yeah, I just
Or
opened incognito. Yeah, but where do I see I clicked the
So
sign up and I got the
It
thing.
says
That,
on the left
Bryce said.
column, it says free.
oh, you have to go to
And under
GitHub
the
Pricing.
zero, there's
That's
a
what it
button
was.
that
Okay,
says
yeah.
join for free.
Yeah, if you go to pricing, this is the normal one. The one that if you just go to sign up on the thing is the one that Quentin was showing earlier. But it's join for free. And if you're logged in, it says like create an organization. But yeah.
Maybe what I would, it might be, this is good to know. Thank you for sharing
It's
that.
very good.
Yeah.
You know, this
I
has
might-
made my life a little easier.
Still have students do it the other
Everybody's
way,
got-
just in case they try it on their own, because sometimes
Yeah.
they follow along in class. I don't want to get lost because this is hard to find, but
Sending people to a pricing page is definitely all confusing in different ways. So
Mhm.
Here, don't choose the most popular thing in blue.
I will send clients to that page though, if I'm trying to walk them through doing it. At least they're going to do it with me live. Students, I can only assume they might follow along in class or they might pretend to and hope they can do it later.
Oh, that's weird. I on mine, yeah, it's it's so quasi dark pattern here. Like the join for free button is just so less, it's not like all the other buttons. And for a second, when I
reason
loaded
for
it the
that.
first time, the style failed, so it didn't even have a border.
Yeah.
It was
Oh,
just, you
mine
couldn't
has-
even see there was a button. All right, well. All right, thank you. That's a nice win. Caroline.
Well, I joined late because I'm so absorbed in testing my latest interview.
Good, it's nice to be.
those test things are amazing. I mean, every time I go through this, I'm so bowled over and grateful for this testing, because I'm not a detailed person. So, and I just like copy and paste huge swaths of code and stuff all over the place. And it's been really good. And then I've been using VS Code because I can't, when I have all this stuff and there's a missing parenthesis or something. And so I asked Vito about, because the colors weren't showing up, and I find those colors really helpful. Turns out I didn't have the Python interpreter at the bottom right-hand corner. So there are these little teeny tips that the testing is not teeny, the testing is huge. But these little tips like turning Python in VS Code and the color bracket colorization stuff is really helpful. And I told you I used ChatGPT to find something, right? But the second time I tried, it didn't help. So, but yeah, I'm just plugging along. Hopefully I'll get this third interview set up so that our admin person can compare the PDFs, and I'm actually making progress.
That is always nice to hear.
Yeah. So that's what, so David, did you hear the DocAssembly maintenance workshop was pretty good.
Oh yeah, I was wondering how that went.
Yeah, I think it went pretty well. Nobody really had any questions. So I think
You
that
videoed it?
Pardon?
It was videoed, so people can go back.
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
questions, right?
But it's sometimes you learn that's
Oh
where
yeah, I hate it when there are no questions.
Yeah, and as a presenter, it feels really awkward, doesn't it?
I'm like, what have I done wrong that there are no
Yeah.
questions? No one is following along.
Right. So I think that, but the people who were there, were sort of all over the place in terms of who's running a DocAssembly server. So I think that in some ways it was an introduction. So for example, Amanda's had the developers, they paid developers to set it up. So she didn't really know. And I have this issue with, I can't get into AWS. I have to
So you have your own.
And
you set up your own local one, I remember, just for.
Oh that. Yeah, right. But things like some of the stuff like the Ubuntu and the Linux. It was interesting because that was something I was in a bad place because I had thought it was 8 o'clock our time, not 7 o'clock. So
I'm sorry, I just realized we've gone long.
You gotta go.
You gotta go. Meeting.
Okay. Sorry.
I'll just transfer over and let someone else close this off. Sorry, I lost track of the time. Have a great weekend, all.
You too, David.
Yeah, have a great weekend. And just in a closing, I had this thought, which while I was watching, specifically while I was watching Quentin and Bryce earlier go back and forth on some stuff, I was thinking, wow, I work with people who really, I haven't said in a while. It's great working with you guys, and I think I don't want to be too
crying.
I really appreciate what you do. There we go. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye, David.
You too, David.
What a sweetheart.
Caroline with her. Yeah. So I was gonna say I actually thought it went well. And I think that was a very tricky, the fact there weren't a ton of questions. It's kind of tricky because it's one of those, you'll either have a lot of questions when you're setting it up that you just don't know you would have until you come across something that's in your way.
Yeah.
Or you don't notice it until you've been running it for a while. And so I felt like it definitely was necessary, and I'm really glad we recorded it, and it we'll get it out there. Because I think it'll be a great long-term used thing. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's some way we.
So I think the other thing from my perspective is, I was trying to respect Matt's structure. So I had a couple of questions at different intervals in the presentation, and honestly, and of course I was driving, so that was problematic because I couldn't write them down. And then by the time we got to the question period, I'd forgotten what the questions were. But one thing I'm wondering, I mean, there's a couple of things. One, and I think and for many people there, I mean, it wasn't a big group, but I think for many people there, it was a presentation. Sorry, not a presentation. It was an introduction in a way. So, so people didn't, I think a lot of people there did not set up their own DocAssembly servers. And so it was sort of their first look at it. And I mean, I don't think Emily set up their DocAssembly server. Amanda didn't set up theirs. So it's sort of like a first look at it in a way, the whole AWS side. And so what might be to sort of carry on with the value of that, what might be helpful is maybe in 6 months, if people have looked at people may go back and look at that video again, and they may have more questions. If what I'm wondering is, if you guys post that video on your YouTube channel, I'm wondering if people could ask questions about it. So one thing that I'm remembering that I didn't remember during the question period is, Matt was saying, well, when you first SSH, not when you first, but it says when you first log in, it's sort of, there are this many upgrades or updates or something, like he showed 12 updates or whatever it was. Do you want to apply these? And for some of them, you need to restart the server or something like that. And I had thought you could just ignore those. So I've never done anything about those. And he said that he does them all. He always just does it. And so that was interesting because I don't do it. And it always makes me a little bit nervous not to do it. So that was one of the things I wondered about. And I would go back and look at that bit that he did, that he showed us, to do it again. But what if we had it, either if people could think about look at it and sort of record their questions somewhere, and then we come back in a few months saying, did you look at if you looked at the video and you've got questions, here's the question period. So you weren't ready to ask your questions in that 15 minutes, but maybe a few months later you review the video and we could offer a question answer period about that. And that would also mean that some people, so Amanda might have spoken to her developers, she might be be able to get into the AWS. I definitely am hoping to get something about the IAM, because our IT department isn't going to give me access to the monitoring that Matt showed in the beginning, unless we can show them that setting up an IAM or not. Like Quentin, you said Amazon's discouraging IAM accounts, but if there were a way to look at some of that stuff and explain to the IT department why it's important for me to see it, rather than for them to just take a screenshot and send it to me. And then, I mean, also because Matt was saying he watches that, and if it goes over 50%, he gets an alert or an email. I'm thinking, well, what's causing it? What makes it go? Because he said this happens for different reasons, but I'm not really clear on why that happens and what you can do about it. Yeah. So those are the kinds of things that would be helpful to come back to, and it I think it was a lot of new information for people, so that they had to absorb it before they could, you have to sort of, has to kind of percolate before you can come back and kind of think about it critically. So those are I mean, it was great. There's no criticism at all of the way. I think Matt did a fantastic job, but I'm just sort of saying, being a person in the audience and also having a little bit more familiarity with the DocAssembly server than some other people on the call, so those are my thoughts. I thought I'm kicking myself for forgetting that it was at 7 instead of 8. That's my time zone challenge. Especially when I'm normally in the office at 6 or 6:30. That was really a fluke. But yeah.
I think we could do, let me see. So good ideas.
We can see comments, like we can see comments on whatever YouTube video we post, and that's a thing that we can just do. We'll see anyone who comments on our stuff. We haven't literally. I'm looking at this the page for the YouTube channel right now, and there are no comments.
Right.
But like that's definitely a thing we could do. Of like if we post it, people just have comments and make them on YouTube. We can definitely answer them there. And I guess if it's worth, and then if we get enough, then it's worth it to like make a like additional version or like additional section that's just like answering those specific things or going into the more detail. That might be useful. But yeah.
I mean, the thing is, it's this issue of, but actually that might work pretty well. This issue of multiple places where information is posted. But what I'm thinking is that if the comments, if you can make ask questions and comments below the video, and then in our grant partners teams channel, we can link to it. Because what I'm thinking is maybe, I mean, in some ways it's more appropriate to have it in Slack or Teams, but then you lose it, right? I mean, then you can't, if you have the Slack, it's gone 90 days later.
Yeah,
but
Teams is not made for this.
Everybody's in Teams.
Yeah, our Teams is not open anyway. It's like that's
exactly. Yeah. So maybe the thing to do is have the discussion and the conversation in the YouTube channel, and then as Matt and you guys update the documentation, you can refer to that video, but also use the comments and the questions as content in the documentation, so they work together. Does that sound like a?
Yeah, I'm also thinking like we should add a page on the legal tech class about this with the video, and it can have his notes and his slides to start, and it could be built out into like a page that lays it out. And it could even have a section with like, here are the questions that came up and the answers to the questions.
Right.
Because then that's a permanently archived thing.
Right. Yeah. And the legal tech. So one thing I struggle with is this
problem.
The integration of the assembly line documentation and the legal tech documentation, because there's some stuff in the legal tech, which I don't think is in the assembly line documentation. And some of the legal tech stuff is a lot easier to read. I'm not sure that's 100% true, but I mean, I look both places for things because I'm not quite sure. And you have the whole.
Probably because Quinn spent more time actually polishing that than we have on our docs.
Yeah, I mean, and also different. I mean, you're doing it for a tech. I mean, you have a very directed audience. I mean, they're lesson plans in a way, whereas assembly line is just like huge documentation, everything. I mean, there's tons of stuff.
Assembly line stuff came straight from like Google Docs, and like whatever was sort of like randomly put in docs like early in the project.
Yeah, trying to collect
and cleaned it up a little bit, but like that is why our stuff is probably not
I mean, I think the assembly line documentation is fantastic. I don't, but I'm just saying there are a few places that I go to legal if I can't find it in assembly line, or I can't understand it in assembly line. I mean, the other side to that is two people can describe the same thing slightly differently, and you get more out of reading both versions. You know what I mean? There's different things are emphasized. The two people describing the elephant, right? Whatever, I mean, and then you get a better picture reading both of them. So there's not,
I mean, I think that's just the community thing though. Like, I feel like, I think that's just like, if we get more people in the DocAssembly community also like posting on like, or making videos and all these sorts of things, then we get a lot of that.
Right.
I don't think we really want to have multiple perspectives describing the same thing, like on Suffolk hosted stuff, which I think includes both the assembly line project and the legal tech stuff. Like, I think we definitely try to like, if it's already in the legal tech class, we link there, and we have like a header, like a 1-sentence section that just says like, see more in the legal tech class. I'm pretty sure we have that.
You're saying that's in the assembly line documentation. It says, see the legal tech thing?
Yes, we
It
have
is,
in a few
yeah.
places.
Oh,
Not all over the
So-
place, but we do it in some places. And we have
is it like setting up your is that it? You started setting up your own assembly line. Do you link that? I would imagine that would be a place. I'm trying
Right.
to remember what the legal tech, I can't always remember what's where.
Well, we should probably do more cross-linking, but in general, I think there's a few pages that are duplicated. So there's this applying a custom theme or brand
Uh-huh.
that's duplicated.
And is there a link here to legal tech?
No, this
Okay,
might be the one page that's not. The big difference is because there's this AL theme template.
yeah,
That is unique to the assembly line. The idea, the concept of the two different sites and why they both exist. You're not the first person to say that it's confusing to have two different ones. One is like, this was meant to just be documenting our code originally, but it's
the
growing
assembly line.
because we're supporting more and more people with it, right?
Right, yeah. Mhm.
And, but still, this, the legal tech class here is general about DocAssemble. It doesn't have assembly line specific information at all.
Right, yeah, so this is for anybody who wanted to set up DocAssemble who may not be using assembly line.
Right. Which I don't know how important that is, to be honest.
Well, people might have their reasons for not. I
I
mean,
feel like I feel like it's definitely important for everyone else in the community. It's probably less important for us as assembly line to maintain both, but I do feel like the legal tech stuff is.
but you know what would be
Okay.
this comparable applications? It's assembly line. I mean, do you talk about assembly line anywhere in the legal tech documentation?
I might have some.
Oh, there you go. Overview of the assembly line. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this is, I guess, an unlinked page. It's still reachable through search.
Hmm.
This is an unlinked syllabus page.
Oh, I see. Hmm.
So that's not really. Here, this is one place where I mentioned it.
Hmm.
A live page, which is
Yeah.
if you use the assembly line, do this too.
Right. Well, it's good stuff anyway, but I like both of them. So,
I think it probably makes sense to keep that separation for now, since I think it's mostly just this one page that's duplicated.
mhm,
And we do
Oh,
link to them here.
mhm.
I could link to it as a tab here in my class. I usually just update this when I have a new semester starting,
Uh-huh.
or if I want to add a new module. So I've been trying to add more modules. Like I probably want to add an AI module here,
Mhm.
which is just, it's not really relevant to the assembly line. I mean, the AI stuff is, but it's not like, it's different kind of content. It's just the DocAssemble section here that could overlap. But I think having it be like generic DocAssemble versus assembly line DocAssemble is a fairly reasonable split. And to make it clearer, it just requires changing a few pages on the
Yeah,
documentation page.
yeah.
So that's a good thought. I'll open an issue for that.
I just have to, I have them both, bookmarked or something in my browser because I can't figure out how to I can't always figure out how to get to them.
There is a link on both, just so you know. So,
To each other.
well, at least on the assembly line one, there's a link to the legal tech class. I guess there's not vice versa. So I can try to add that.
Mhm. So if you can get to one, you can get to the other, but.
But I'll open up an issue now to say.
And are there in the Suffolk Lit Lab assembly line? I mean, that would be the other place to stick it. Is have links to both of them on the Suffolk Lit Lab page, because I can find that. I can just search Suffolk Lit Lab and this is just assuming
It is there
I
actually.
never log into my work profile browser, where I have them saved. But if I couldn't find them, that would be a good place to link from, because I'm not going to forget Suffolk Lit Lab, and you can search on it. It's a little bit harder right now. Although I think if you Google assembly line, Suffolk assembly line, you probably get something. I don't know. It's harder to find the legal tech stuff.
Yeah, it's not as like easily Googleable. You're right. But no, the legal tech class is on the Suffolk Lab page. It's one of
okay.
4 projects on the front page.
Okay, good. All right, and then if you link to assembly line, then that's the easy way to get to it if I lose my bookmarks or something.
I was gonna say, I'm trying to figure out one of the things actually that an email that I saw that like I ignored because we didn't quite need it was that the original search thing that we tried to do with our the documentation site, Agolia, like originally they denied us, even though it was supposed to be free for like open source projects. For some reason, we're open source. They don't know what they're doing. But they sent a follow-up email that they've just changed the program, so it's all developer documentation.
Okay.
And so we could potentially do that. And I was trying to see if there was a way to get that to index both pages, such that when you search on one of them, it brings up all the solutions.
That would be great. Yeah.
That would be a perfect fix.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you want me to open an issue for that, or do you want to link to like the change thing? And so you should open it. I'm in the documentation issues section now because I'm just adding an issue to remove the duplication of content.
Yeah, I will send out. I think we still have to apply maybe, but it's just apply again and you'll get it because it's developer documentation. But I'll if you want to make an issue or at least just a blank issue, I can fill it in with info and progress and stuff. So.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna go bang my head against why these 2 tests keep failing. Looks like they're the same thing. Looks like the sentence it says isn't there is showing up. So I don't know why I even put it into the diff checker. So something I'm not seeing. I don't know.
Are you getting the screenshots from it?
Yes, I'm getting screenshots. I didn't get, I mean, somewhere it said no screenshot. I don't care about the screen. First, the most thing I care about is I just look at the text for the failed scenario. And then I look at it and I say, well, you're saying this isn't showing up, but when I run it manually, it shows up. So what am I missing?
Yeah.
So if I get that, if I'm absolutely 100% certain that I'm getting what it says I'm not getting, then I will let you know.
Yeah, that's fair. I would. Yeah, I would. That's because that's the thing is that's testing is great because it's like, oh, I did this manually, but it's like, oh, but did you forget to click one specific thing? So
yeah,
just kind of.
I mean, what's nice so far is all my tests that have failed so far are because I didn't write the test correctly, not because the interview isn't right. So that always makes me feel better.
That is most of my issues too. It's not super great, but yeah.
I guess it tells you something about like how easy it is to write the test, which is good information to improve. But
yeah. Well, I do a lot of copying and pasting in tests, I have to say. So if I just copy and paste and said, give me all the steps for a motion to reconsider, and it should be a motion to set aside, that's on me. So anyway, I'm going to go do that. Thank you so much. Bryce, you're going to be around if it turns out there's a problem with this? What time is it? 1:30 your time?
Yeah, I'll be around, and yeah, I'm mostly just like wrapping up other stuff.
Okay.
And so I can if you post something in coding help or something.
Okay. Well, let's assume it's my own error. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And sometimes I don't see it till I'm showing it to some, like, oh, there it is. So but it's just frustrating, because I did something, it took me for hours yesterday, and then it wasn't that obvious. It was some code that we'd stuck in, and we were changing the whole order of how this interview works. So then I have to go through and hack out all this old, the code that's no longer relevant. So but I don't want to remove it completely because somebody might want to add it back in again. They might change their mind again. Guess that's what GitHub versions are for, right?
I was gonna say, yeah, if they want to add it back in, they
I
should
can,
understand to go back into the GitHub history.
right. Okay, you guys. Well, thank you so much. Have a terrific weekend. See you next
You
week.
too.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Probably gonna hop off.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Yeah, I'm gonna just try to get. I'll grab a couple of those bite-sized issues. See how I get on with that.
That's
All
right.
right.
I
See you
can't turn
guys.
off the YouTube streaming, but I'm assuming it stops when we exit.
I think it will
Okay.
not stream indefinitely empty content forever. We'll see.